Well, good morning, everyone. It's 8 o'clock on the dot. Thanks for waking up and starting your morning with Clean Lakes Alliance 101 Science Cafe. My name is meteorologist Max Saparis. I work the wake up shift here at WKOW 27 News, our station proud sponsor of these events with Clean Lakes Alliance. I'd like to welcome everyone who's watching today virtually for our Zoom webinar, just taking a brief step back where we're all virtual. Next year, though, we will return to in-person meetings. Today, we're going to learn more about something so tiny for us that has such a big impact. We're talking seeds, specifically hearing about native seed collection that is going to help Dane County's more than 17,000 acres of land. To support county prairies and establish new ones, the demand for native seeds quite high. In 2021 alone, the estimated value of collected seeds here in the county exceeded $1 million and will be used to restore hundreds of acres of land. So today we'll learn how the seeds are collected, what they're used for, and how important prairie restoration work is. If you're watching online with us, of course, be sure to submit your questions in the Q&A section of the tab, not the chat tab, but to the right, to the left of where it says share screen, you'll see a button that says Q&A. You'll want to click that, ask your questions, and then at the end of the talk, we'll go through those questions from about 8:40 to 9 o'clock. Before I start today, I want to introduce Paul Tyson from National Guardian Life Insurance Company to give us a few updates about Clean Lakes Alliance. Good morning, Paul.
Hi, Max. Thank you. National Guardian Life is proud to be a supporting sponsor of these talks. I want to take a minute and thank the rest of our sponsors. First Weber and Johnson Financial Group are the presenting sponsors of Clean Lakes 101 Science Cafes, and also making this possible are the hosting sponsor, the Edgewater, and the production partners UW Nelson Institute for Environmental Studies and the UW Extension. Like Max said, we are also extremely happy to have WKOW as a media sponsor. Before we get started with today's talk, so just a few quick updates. First, registration for the popular Frozen Assets 5K Run and Walk is now open. This is held as a part of Frozen Assets Week. The Run Walk is the only 5K in North America held entirely on frozen lake. So sign up when you can. Registration includes a free shirt courtesy of Land's End, as well as a beer or seltzer courtesy of Wisconsin distributors. Registration information is on cleanlakesalliance.org. Second, we're only a few weeks away from the kickoff of the Mendota Freeze Contest. The free contest opens on December 1st and asks folks to guess the date Lake Mendota will freeze. Winners who select the correct date will be entered into a drawing for a $1,000 Land's End gift card. Finally, it's the end of the year, so we want to remind you to renew your individual friend or business or organization lake partner donation. These important dollars are used by Clean Lakes Alliance to fund lake-related projects and advocate on your behalf. Get those donations in. Back to today's talk, which is titled Native Seeds for the Future, Dane County's Seed Program. Here to present this exciting topic is Lars Higdon, a botanist and naturalist with Dane County Parks. Lars works closely with volunteers to restore prairies, savannas, and woodlands across dozens of parks and project sites. Actually, some folks from NGL, myself included, just spent an afternoon at the Prairie at Yahara Heights Park a few weeks ago collecting seeds. So I'm, personally very anxious to see how this all works. Want to know what all those partridge pea seeds are going to be used for. But Lars has worked in multiple Wisconsin communities, and he holds a master's degree from UW-Madison. So please join me in welcoming Lars Higdon.
Well, thank you, Paul. Thank you, Max. Big shout out to Clean Lakes Alliance. Thank you for your partnership and your support. It's been wonderful working with you and your staff and your volunteers the last several years on multiple projects. Looking forward to working with you quite a bit more in the future. Big thank you to our volunteers that make this program a success, a tremendous success. Couldn't do it without you. Wouldn't be here today talking about this without all your support, all your help. I'd also like to highlight the efforts of previous park staff, Wayne Pauley, retired botanist naturalist, whose position I now occupy, and Rhea Stengelmeyer, volunteer coordinator. Both of these individuals helped to build up this native seed program, the volunteer program, and provide that foundation from which we are growing and expanding off of. Their efforts were tremendous and are continuing to pay off for the county, the volunteers, and the prairies here in the future. Today, I'm going to be talking not so much about landscape connections between water quality and land cover, land uses, and so forth. I'm going to be focusing more in on the nuts and bolts of our seed program, the process, the details, the ins and outs. Also hoping that this sparks an interest within viewers out there that you might come and join us for some of our seed collecting events. It's really an unbelievable program, an unbelievable activity to get involved in. It's just a lot of fun, and it provides so many benefits to the parks and so many ecological services to the communities that we all hold dear. So I hope you enjoy the presentation. I'm going to start out by talking a little bit about the background of Dane County Parks, our natural areas program, volunteerism, and then I'm going to quickly go right into our native seed program and highlight that process. So I hope you enjoy. Okay. I see it's forwarding slides now. Just a little background about our park system. It's a large and growing park system with different park classification areas throughout the county, mostly focusing on the outlying rural areas of Dane County, although we do have some more urban parks, especially parks close to the chain of lakes. But chances are, if you live in Dane County, you do not have to travel very far to get to one of our many parks and natural areas throughout this beautiful county. Something like 17,000 acres or so of parkland, quickly growing, as we all know. Here in this chart right here, starting in the 1930s, the county acquired Stewart Lake County Park out in the town of Mount Horeb. Then over time, we expanded in park acreage in the 1970s. And then from there, continued to go up almost exponentially. And here we sit in the 2020s, somewhere in that 17,000 acre range, in addition to a couple thousand acres of conservation easements that we hold throughout the county park system. Our natural areas restoration and maintenance sites are scattered throughout our park system. Regardless of park classification type, whether it's recreation area, natural resource area, wildlife area, we are doing restoration on something like 70 to 80 sites throughout the county parks. If you want to learn more about any one of these restoration sites, I'd invite you to check out our Natural Areas Program story map. If you just Google Natural Areas Program, Dane County Parks, this story map will come up. And on the Restoration Projects tab, you can see a map of all our restoration sites and then a corresponding picture with a short description of what's occurring on that site. So have a look at your leisure there. There's just so much going on. And again, we couldn't do nearly a fraction of what we're doing without the help of so many wonderful volunteers and friends groups. Our volunteerism has grown tremendously over the years, starting in the 90s. And almost mirrors our acquisition acreage totals in that nearly exponential growth curve here. In 2018, 3,700 volunteers donated 66,000 hours of volunteer service. it's just tremendous. It's unbelievable. And it surpasses many counties here in the upper Midwest. I would go so far as to say it's probably the leading county in the upper Midwest, even considering counties around the Twin Cities, Milwaukee, and Chicago in terms of the number of volunteers that are out there working the parks. We have 19 friends groups scattered throughout the county that help to support these parks, support our natural areas programs, our prairie and savanna restoration projects, and they're a tremendous asset for us to work with. Our natural areas program sort of has a two-parted mission. The first part being to steward the land, to take care of these natural resources, to take care of these parklands so they continue to be healthy well into the future. We also have the goal of working closely with people in our communities to restore that connection to the landscape, to restore our understanding of the land and how the land works and how our impact on the land takes shape in these natural areas, and how we can intervene and steward these areas into the future as we face many challenges such as climate change, pollution, urbanization, and so forth. So we're really trying hard, not just to take care of the land, but also to get communities involved, to get volunteers involved, to foster that land ethic within Dane County so it will endure into the future and continue to sustain these restored lands, as Robin Wall-Kimmerer says. And when I say steward the land, typically I'm talking about stewarding natural communities. And what I mean by that is here in Wisconsin, we have done a very good job, thanks to the efforts of many botanists out of the UW and throughout the state, to classify and describe the natural communities that exist and existed here in Wisconsin. Here in Dane County, in the south central part of this map, you'll see it's very yellow, indicating prairie and oak savanna is our early vegetation cover type in this part of the state. Compared to as you travel north, you transition more into this greenish shade, some darker colors that indicate maple, conifers, boreal forest, even in the northern part of the state. These are the natural communities that existed prior to European settlement in the 1830s. And many of these communities still remain on the landscape, and maybe in fragments and remnants, but all the ingredients to make that recipe, to make those natural communities, are still there on the landscape, waiting for us to just steward them, restore them, and nurture them back to health. So here in Dane County, we're focused mostly on prairie, oak savanna, oak woodland, sort of the three top images on the picture to the right. Forest wasn't always that common, and still isn't that common, at least not healthy forests in this part of the state. We tend to focus more on tree thinning, invasive species removal, and prescribed burning to maintain more open communities that we had here more historically and can have again in the future. All right, so that's a little background about natural areas, our volunteerism, and kind of what we do. I'm going to transition specifically now into our native seed program. As Max pointed out at the top of the hour, we have reached some pretty incredible goals in the last couple of years. In 2021, volunteers and a limited number of staff collected 3,300 pounds of clean native seed. That's not bulk material, that's clean seed. After it was cleaned down to nearly pure seed, nearly 3,300 pounds. If we would have had to purchase that seed from a seed nursery, that would have been over $1 million in value that we would have had to spend. So it's a tremendous effort. It's unbelievable what we were able to do with volunteers. With that seed, we planted over 250 acres of new prairie and added seed to oak savanna and oak woodland restorations that are ongoing. This year, it looks like an even better harvest. It looks like we're going to collect more seed, more pounds, more value, likely to hit the $1.5 million mark, probably over 4,000 pounds of native seed. And we're probably going to be planting about 375 acres of new lands with all of those volunteer contributions. So how do we do it? Starting up with seed collection. This is only the first step of the process. We use a lot of different people that come in, different age groups. We use schools, we use youth, we use families, we use retired adults, we use corporations. Clean Lakes Alliance has certainly come in and helped us quite a bit, bringing in corporate partners. We hold regular volunteer work days, 2 to 3 days a week, twice a day throughout the months of September and October, with occasional collections in the summer, June, July, and August. And we just go like crazy, collecting as much as we possibly can. We spend a lot of time with our volunteers, helping them to identify the species that they're collecting, helping to identify the seed, what it looks like, how to collect it properly. It's an educational experience for many. We spend time, like I said, trying to connect people with that land, trying to reacquaint them with our flora or fauna. It's very educational. However, people come out for a variety of reasons. Aside from wanting to learn, people are also just trying to get out of the city, try to decompress, try to relax, try to meet other like-minded individuals, have friendly conversations in the prairie, or maybe just relax and get away, have a quiet time, taking in the fall colors, watching the wildlife, the camaraderie. People come out for a whole variety of reasons. We also do a little bit of mechanized collection. This is just a small fraction of our seed collection efforts, and it's focused only on a few species that we can collect with machinery. Almost all of our species do not cooperate in this way and are not collectible with a machine like this, which is our seed stripper. This machine is sort of has sort of a broom, almost like a street sweeper does, underneath that metal housing. And it can go across an area that has one species of seed, in this case, Virginia wild rye, that all sort of ripens at the same plane or the same level. The operator here, Shane Otto, just simply puts that broom right where those seeds are located, maybe 2-3 feet off the stem, and he can sweep in with that broom into a hopper a whole bunch of seed. Like I said, it only works with a couple species, usually grasses, so big blue stem, Indian grass, little blue stem, some of our wild rye it works really well on. And then we can focus our volunteer efforts on some of those harder to collect species, mostly forbs that are intermixed together with other species that have to be distinguished, and they don't all sort of grow and develop at that same horizontal plane, making them impossible to strip by seed. Of the species that we collect, probably 5 are collectible in this mechanized way. Another 220 species need to be collected by hand. So we do collect somewhere between 220 and 230 different species every year. Moving on. So regardless of how the species is collected, the first step after it's collected is to bring it back to our facility for seed drying. This is a critical step in the process. We need to get all the moisture off the plant, the dew, any rain, and then any moisture that's embedded in the tissue of the plant or in the seed. We have to get that nice and dry. Otherwise, we can get molding problems, and that just prevents us from going any further in the process. So we lay the seed typically down in these little baby pools. Those are about the right size for us, down in front of fans. In our processing facility, we've probably got 8 to 10 racks, all with 3 fans and 3 shelves going constantly all fall, just drying seed. When it's finally dry enough, they can be removed. And the next step is to pass them through our hammer mills. Just with everything else, volunteers are intimately involved in this step as well. We hold volunteer days intermittently every Monday throughout the fall, September, October, and then constantly the first 2 weeks of November, which is what we're doing right now. All day, every day, 9 a.m. to noon, 1 to 4. The first 2 weeks of November, we are just doing nothing but cleaning seeds. So as I said, the first step of the process is to pass them through this hammer mill. Essentially, it's like a big grinder, coffee grinder of sorts. You pass it through the top, it grinds it up in the middle of the machine, and then passes it out the bottom in sort of a mulch. Here's a look inside the hammer mill. This little cylinder with the hammers spins around at a tremendous speed, and there's a wire mesh or strainer that this individual is holding up that keeps the seeds close to the hammers, and you can change it out with different size holes, different size mesh to ensure that the seed is pulverized down to a small enough size before it's allowed to pass through beyond the hammers. So this is sort of a middle of the range mesh. We can open it up and let seed pass through at a much larger size, or tamp it way down to a fine mesh and make sure it's very pulverized before it passes through. The seed comes in, usually embedded in a capsule or a seed head or attached to a branch, or it might have sort of a fluff on it, as in the case of the aster family. This machine turns all of that into a mulch where all those seeds are released and no longer attached to any sort of seed head or inside of any capsule. That allows us to begin working with the seed. If it's constricted or restricted or attached in any way, we can't go any farther and it's no good. So that's the goal of this process. We don't do any physical separation yet. It's simply to release the seed. And here's a picture. This is soft stem bulrush, a species that likes wet feet, wet ground, wetland areas. On the left is before it passes through the hammer mill. The seed is attached inside of these little seed heads on the end of the stalks. It's dried after bringing in from the field. And now it passes through the hammer mill and it's ground up into a mulch, but no separation has occurred at this stage. The next step is where the separation does occur, and that's called the fanning mill, and it produces a product that looks like this. We take the ground up mulch of the seed after the hammer mill, pass it through the fanning mill, and using screens and a fan, we can get almost down to pure seed, which is what I'm zoomed in on in this right picture here. This is the seed and nothing else. Everything else has been filtered off. Here's an image of the fanning mills. These two are antiques. They're probably 100 years old. They used to be operated with a hand crank. The operator would have to crank it. Now we've converted them over with an electric motor that does the cranking for us. It has 2 screens and a fan that separate the seed based on differences in seed size and seed weight. Here our volunteers are just simply feeding the machine and letting the machine do the work. Here's a zoom up of the mechanicals here on the fanning mill. On the left, we have 2 screens, a top screen and a bottom screen. The volunteer operator will sift the seed out onto the top screen, which typically has a much larger mesh. The seed passes through that larger mesh, but the chaff in most cases is too big to pass through and is shunted off into a side bin where the seed passes through and falls onto the bottom screen. The bottom screen is too tight of a mesh, too fine of a weave to allow that seed to pass through, but it does, however, allow the dust or the fine chaff to pass through that bottom screen. So right off the bat, with a couple of screens and a little bit of shaking with that electric motor, we're able to shunt off the big chaff, the big material, and the fine dusty chaff, the fine material, just with these two screens. So now at this point, all you have left is the seed and everything that's about the same size as the seed. What happens now is the seed drops over a little ledge and is dropped in front of a spinning fan. To the right, I have a picture of that opening where the fan is situated inside, and you can control the force of the fan with these two metal plates or pieces of flashing. You open the flashing and let more breeze go through. You restrict the flashing down to make a smaller hole and constrict how much force or how much breeze passes through and across that falling material. So if you have a very fine seed like Culver's root or lobelia, you can tamp down this flashing, restrict that hole, restrict the force of that fan, and really be gentle so as not to blow away your seed, but you do blow away the chaff. If you've got a really large, heavy, big seed, maybe like a Baptisia, indigo, one of the silphiums, you can open up those flashings, creating more fan speed, more force, and blow away that chaff without blowing away your seed. Similar work can be done just at home by tossing seed and chaff up into the breeze or in front of a fan, a box fan, and you can blow off that light chaff and let that heavier seed drop down. Very simple but genius equipment that's been around for quite a while, and the machines we still use today. Even the modern machines made of metal instead of wood are exactly the same way. We've got a couple of screens and a fan that help us to separate the seed. After the seed is separated, we get a good accurate weight off of the seed that helps us to design seed mixes and make sure we're putting the right amount of seed on the site, not too little, not too much, not wasting it. And we can create mixes with different species that are appropriate for that soil type, that amount of sunlight and so forth. So we spend a lot of time just creating seed mixes on the computer, putting labels together, putting a plan of action, organizing our seed alphabetically, all of which our volunteers are very involved with in this process. And then finally, when we have our seed mixes designed and developed, our labels made, we have seed weighing days. Typically these occur, a little before or a little after Thanksgiving. This year it'll probably be a little after Thanksgiving. And over the course of a couple, 2-3 days or so, all day with 10 volunteers at a time, half-hour sessions, we weigh out our seed into little baggies that go to different sites. So this right here is Dennis Tandy, longtime volunteer, and looks like he might be weighing out some rose seed. We'll give him a list of sites for that rose, each with a different predetermined amount of seed or seed weight that he weighs out on that scale right there in front of him. And then he puts that seed into that little Ziploc bag with a label. And then we allocate that rose to that particular site. We usually have 25 to 30 plus county park sites where the seed goes out to. And we also provide seed to school groups, nonprofit partner organizations, other municipalities, and so forth. So the seed goes a long way to advancing a lot of goals here in Dane County, not just on Dane County Parks land, mostly on Dane County Parks land, but also to partner organizations and so forth. Well, after all that time we spend separating out that seed, we end up mixing it all back in with that chaff. So here on the left, someone has dumped all of the weighed out seed bags into this swimming pool, making a nice, beautiful collage of mosaic of seeds here, different textures and colors that will eventually be mixed back in with some of our better material chaff that doesn't have sticks or dust in it. We mix it back in with the chaff as a way to dilute the seed. If you were to just take a handful of some of these seeds and cast them out on a prairie or a savanna, you'd be casting out thousands and thousands of seeds in one handful. That's too high, too dense of a seeding rate. So what we do is we dilute it back with our chaff. The chaff probably has a few seeds in it as well. Or you could use sawdust, shavings at home. I've heard of people using sand, really any material to dilute that seed and help you broadcast at a more desirable rate. Also, we do some of our broadcasting with a tractor and mechanical broadcaster. So we need to get that seed nice and clean, and then only use chaff to dilute it that doesn't have any twigs in it, that will plug up the slots in our broadcaster. So we mix it all back together, dilute it at the right rate, and then it's staged and set and ready to go out in the field for planting. We do our planting in the wintertime, which is sort of the opposite of what most people think. We like to plant on the snow in the winter. Most people think that we wait until spring, plant it like we do our garden, and that is not the way it works. Native seeds have evolved to mature and disperse in the fall and early winter. So we simulate what nature's doing. They've evolved this way. Nature has a way of doing things, and we simply mimic what nature has done. If you wait until spring, you are in danger of not having the ability to incorporate that seed into the soil horizon. The seed settles in on the snow or underneath the snow in the winter, and as we get lots of freezing and thawing and freezing and thawing, as we do here in Wisconsin, that soil expands and contracts. Water expands as it freezes, contracts as it melts. Soil expands and contracts as that snow and rain comes, temperatures go up and down, and that expansion and contraction helps to settle that seed down into the soil profile and find that perfect level. If you plant it in with a drill, a seed drill, a mechanized drill, or rake it in by hand, you can sort of simulate that. However, you might be planting it a little too deep or a little too shallow, and that's a lot of work to do all that physical planting. So we let nature do it. We simply broadcast it on top of the snow. The additional advantage there is that you can see where you've been. In the case, in this picture on the right, there's tracks all over this field, and we can see exactly where we've been broadcasting with the tire tracks, or if you're doing it by hand with the footprints, and you can actually see the little seeds and chaff or sawdust on the top of the snow with that white background. That way we can get a very uniform distribution of seeds across the entire site. Here's Pheasant Branch Conservancy, us seeding the new acre farm acquisition, 160 acres just north of Pheasant Branch Conservancy. Lots of volunteer efforts to collect the seed, to purchase the seed in the case of Friends of Pheasant Branch Conservancy, and Clean Lakes Alliance Nature Conservancy to help purchase additional seeds, and other partners as well. Tremendous effort. And this site is now halfway seeded, 80 more acres to go. All right, here's a picture of folks seeding by hand in the wintertime or in the fall. Wooded sites are especially good to seed by hand because you simply just can't get a tractor through the trees or a UTV through the trees, or on slopey ground like this. And this is an example of our Operation Fresh Start crew seeding at Fescue on a sloped wooded hillside where we certainly can't broadcast with any sort of machinery. Okay, so that is the process of seed collection to planting, but that is not all. That is only part of the process. When you zoom out, our natural areas require a lot of other management. Some folks like to think that when you seed and the seeds hit the ground, the process is over, but these sites require management in perpetuity in face of invasive species, climate change, fire suppression, all these disturbances that we're dealing with nowadays. We need to be there, at least in this region, stewarding these landscapes. And in this case, we spend winter time in these seeded sites, in these management sites, conducting tree and brush removal, removing buckthorn, honeysuckle, all these invasive species, but also native trees that are not consistent with some of these natural communities that encroach when there's been too long a period without natural fire, wildfire or prescribed fire. So in a nice healthy oak savanna or oak woodland, you might get an overabundance of hickory, of black cherry, of elm, ash, maple, and all these species begin to change and degrade those systems for the worse. So in the wintertime, we do a lot of brush and tree removal. In the summertime, there's a lot of weed control in these native prairies, natural communities that needs to occur, digging, mowing, treating weeds. Usually a combination of approaches are necessary, especially in early stage restorations. The balance can tip in any direction, so it's critically important that you keep the invasive weeds under control in order to let those native species flourish and really grasp the site for the long term. Last but certainly not least, prescribed fire. All of these communities in southern Wisconsin, prairie, oak, savanna, woodland, evolved and adapted under the conditions of regular, frequent wildfire or fire that was set by Native Americans to manage the landscape. Fire is an incredibly important ingredient. It's probably the single most important management tool that we have. If we could do nothing else, burning is the most important thing. It really helps to stimulate native prairies. It boosts flowering and seed production. It keeps brush out of the system, suppresses brush, suppresses and manages weeds, especially when timed properly to the right phenology. It's an incredibly important tool that has shaped the landscape of southern Wisconsin, the vegetation of southern Wisconsin, and really helps to restore the land and is critical to turning these communities around for the better into the future. So that's the process. Native seeds from collection to planting, and then management and maintenance with these various types of weed and brush and tree control, prescribed fire, combining all of these techniques, making sure that sites are burned, sites are weeded, sites are getting seeds, and getting attention regularly is really the secret to success. Doing only one of these things, one of these techniques is only going to get you so far. So I am forever grateful for all of our volunteers, all of our partners, our school groups, our corporate groups, and our staff, the wonderful staff that I get to work with each and every day to help support this program, support the parks, support natural communities. Please reach out to us. Myself and Shane Otto lead the Land Management Natural Areas program. Claire Lamberg is our new volunteer coordinator, who's doing an excellent job expanding off of what RIA has built over the years. And we're just so fortunate to live in this wonderful community with so many people engaged in the parks and managing these precious lands. So I hope you'll join us. I hope you'll support Clean Lakes Alliance, and I hope to see you out in the prairie.
All right, thanks so much, Lars. Great presentation. If we were in person, you get the nice round of applause, but we'll have to do that virtually today. Also want to point out, got some good facial hair coming along. I'm actually participating in No Shave November this year. So if you're watching and you're thinking, oh, he looks a little different today, that's what's going on. We are raising some money for LGBT Cancer Society as well. So I'll drop that link in the chat if anyone's interested in donating as I continue to go on this facial hair journey. Now we want to take some questions, of course, of the seed talk that we just got out of. We got some good questions in the comments. We'll just take it chronologically here. An anonymous attendee asking, why do you need to separate the seed from the head of the plant? Why can't you just spread the bulk plant material that was connected, sort of saving time?
Yeah, so if you don't separate the seed, it's attached to that seed head or a capsule or whatever it's attached to, and it's restricted. You really want to spread those seeds across a large area. So if it's attached, you're only able to go so far with that seed, spread it across a much smaller area. It's important that you get that seed released off of the seed head, and then you can get the twigs off of it. You can pass it through a broadcaster without clogging up the holes in the broadcaster. You can grab the seed without grabbing a whole bunch of twigs that you have in the bag. You can combine that seed with other species to create a seed mix. And if you don't have the seed head or chaff material separated off from the seed, you can't get an accurate weight on how much seed you have, which helps you determine how far you can go or how many acres you can cover with that seed.
All right, interesting. Are there any concerns or precautions about spreading plant diseases from one site to the next? So mixing areas that don't generally meet up?
Oh, diseases. I have not seen that before. I have not seen those concerns from my colleagues and peers. The only concern that I have really is spreading invasive species. So if any weedy invasive plant is mixed in, Canada thistle, parsnip. Parsnip's kind of a look-alike for Golden Alexander, one of our native plants. I'm more concerned about some of those seeds getting into our seed bags or on our seed stripper and moving those seeds around as opposed to diseases. We spend a lot of time with our volunteers trying to educate them how to identify these species, what to collect and whatnot. So we do a pretty good job of keeping our seed clean from these invasive pests. But no, I don't have too many concerns about spreading diseases or pathogens. I just don't see that. I don't hear about that. And some of these native pests and pathogens are just part of the ecosystem, and they serve a role as well. So they're out there, they're probably getting around on their own. I don't see that any of our activities kind of amplify that at all.
All right. Anna asks, is there any difficulty with wildlife eating the seeds over winter? We're seeing that a lot right now.
Yeah, really good question. I'm guessing that yes, some small rodents, mice, voles and such, small birds might find some of these seeds, especially when we broadcast them on the snow in the wintertime. We kind of account for that in our seed rate that we broadcast out there. We kind of know that some of them are going to get eaten, or maybe they get washed away, or whatever might happen to them. Their future is uncertain, but I do know that waiting and holding your seed and planting it in the spring instead, even though you might not be providing as much or losing as much to the mammals and the mice, the overall results are inferior. I highly recommend seeding in the winter or the fall underneath or on top of snow cover, even if you do lose a little bit of seed to predation or such.
All righty, makes sense. Next question coming from Jen, bigger picture here. How has climate change altered prairies in our area with plant variety, invasive species, different amounts of insects and birds, etc. And of course, you know, you're also fighting just man-made expansion out there too.
Yeah, that's a very large question. I don't know if anyone can give you a real certain answer. In fact, I know no one can give you a certain answer on that. I mean, we certainly are seeing climate change. We are seeing, you know, these warm stretches in November that are pretty unprecedented. How specifically it's impacting different species of native plants is still being observed and determined. There's a lot of speculation out there. I just can't comment. I don't have enough information. Certainly we are seeing the impacts of climate change, but it's hard to know. It's hard to predict exactly how it's taking shape within our prairies and natural communities.
Yeah, it's certainly a large question to try to answer here. Frankie asking, what type of training do volunteers need to participate in these working days, and where would they need to go to get that done?
Yeah, another great question. So depending on how you want to be involved, there's different amounts of training that you need. If you're simply looking to come out and collect or clean seed, no prior experience or training is necessary. We teach you everything you need to know when you show up. You can find our events on our events calendar, on our homepage at Dane County Parks, and just click and sign up and join us, and we'll teach you everything you need to know about seed collecting, seed cleaning, mixing, all that the day of. If you're looking to do any more advanced sort of work using any sort of tools or equipment, there are trainings that are required of our volunteers in order to do some of those slightly riskier tasks. But seed collection, processing, no training or prior knowledge necessary.
Always good to know. Thanks for that. Kitty asking, it's a very specific question, but is it necessary to remove the fluff from milkweed seeds?
Great question. Milkweed has a lot of fluff, as we all know. Also, asters and goldenrods have fluff connected to them, similar to like how a dandelion has the fluff that comes and disperses the seed in your lawn. And we do work to remove the fluff from our collection of those species. It just helps in the processing of passing it through that second stage, the fanning mill that we went over. If the fluff is attached, that fanning section of the fanning mill, where it blows in front of drops in front of the blowing fan, that fluff will catch that seed and blow it out the back into a chaff bin. So for us, it's important with the volumes of seed that we're working with that we get that fluff off. If you're just collecting some milkweed pods in your backyard and you want to sow them around, you know, no need to take the fluff off. You can let nature do its thing and let the wind carry the fluff and the seed around. And that's just a lot of fun to do as well. That's how nature does it. So that's fine. It just happens that on our scale of operations and our processing, we take the fluff off in order to help us in our approach.
Interesting. Another question here. Again, I just got to scroll up. We're getting some new ones as well. Dan asking, a good question, especially for raising money, I'm sure, for this effort. You got to analyze the success of these programs. So how do you assess the success of growing seeds that were collected and that are now growing?
Well, we spend a lot of time revisiting our restoration sites and monitoring their progression and how they're taking. More often than not, our restoration sites flourish when they're prepped correctly, when the weeds are under control, and we provide a diversity of native seeds with a winter seeding, frost seeding. So if I understand the question correctly, simply by site monitoring, following up, we can get a pretty good read on how things are going. And we can see specifically, oh, this species is germinated well. I remember collecting that at Schumacher County Park and cleaning it, this year. So we can draw a lot of connections between what we see on site, germination and progression over time, to how we did and what we collected, if I understood the question correctly.
Yeah, I think that's what they were talking about there. Next question, kind of relating to that actually, is how long does it take for a prairie to actually start coming in after seeding? Because you know the old expression, the first year the plants sleep, the second year they creep, and then the third year they leap. Is that the same for the native species too?
Absolutely. That saying holds true for prairies 100%. The first year, you're likely to see some pioneer species, black-eyed Susan, yarrow, starting to come up. You might even see some of them flowering if you're fortunate, but you're really not going to see a whole lot. Not a lot of diversity, not a lot of height. You're going to see a lot of annual weeds. Certainly, hopefully you don't see too many perennial weeds that you've got to contend with. So you're pretty much just managing those annual weeds that first time as those seedlings germinate, keeping them from getting smothered. The second year, they creep a little bit more, they get a little bit bigger, they're putting energy into the roots to grow taller. And you might see a few other species sort of show up. By the third and fourth year, the prairie's really starting to look like something. There's a lot more blooming occurring. The height is much higher. Maybe you've got multiple stems on different forbs instead of just a small set of basal leaves poking out of the ground. And then as soon as you can get into year 3, 4, 5, when there's enough fuel accumulated, duff, leaves, stems, debris, and you can get a prescribed burn through, that really kicks the site into high gear, and it really takes off and begins to look like something special.
Cool. Anna wanting to take this to her backyard. If she was going to do it on a small scale there, what would you maybe not have to separate the seeds, or how important is that process?
Yeah, if you're just doing it on a small scale, maybe with a limited number of species, you can sort of take a handful of seed in the seed heads or inside of the little tubes or capsules and just kind of crush it up by hand, walk around with it, kind of cast it around. You don't need to 100% clean it down if you're just working like on a small scale and you're sort of collecting your seed maybe just a few feet away from where you want to scatter it. You can just sort of crush it up, scatter it around, and so forth. Or you could have a little bit more fun, be a little bit more precise. You can work with some hand screens at home, do a little sifting, do a little hand cleaning, maybe get that box fan up and put some seeds up in the air to blow the chaff off. Really, it's whatever you prefer how to do it. I don't want to make it sound like it's absolutely necessary on a small scale to kind of replicate what we're doing here at the county.
5 more questions, 7 more minutes. Can we squeeze them in? Julie has another one for us. Can you use the same winter planting scheme for residential grass lawns? So kind of the same department.
Residential grass lawns, that's going to be a lot of Eurasian grasses like blue joint, or no, Kentucky bluegrass. Yeah. A lot of those species, if they germinate in the fall, may get killed with winter temperatures and freezing coming in. So perhaps I just don't have a lot of experience with sowing lawn seed and getting success. I think you're cautioned to maybe not do that in the wintertime.
This is an interesting question. Going back to your prescribed burns to really allow the native plants to take off. Person saying, we have a lawn in the city. We planted with native seeds a few years ago. It's doing great with native plants now. If they want to do a burn on that in order to sort of jump into high gear, like you were mentioning, who should they contact to get permission? And I think they mean City of Madison.
Yeah, so City of Madison has a permit for conducting controlled burns within the city limits. You can find it on their website electronically, and you can submit the permit to the city. I would caution against doing it if it's something you've never done before, if you're not experienced or trained. If you're at all leery about it, look into getting a professional, and there's certainly contractors around that are more than willing to do those kinds of urban prairie burns.
Ron asking, is the seed actually available for homeowners, or what's the best source to get those?
Our seed is not available for homeowners. However, you can purchase seed through various vendors in the area that are reputable, that carry a diversity of different natives. You can just Google native seeds, Wisconsin, probably get a list of several reputable vendors. We also buy a little bit of seed with grant money to supplement our collection efforts, especially seed species we have very little of. So yes, you can purchase the seed from a few different vendors here in the area. Just with a little Google search would probably work.
Great. Do you ever collect more than you need? And if so, what happens to the surplus?
We do collect more than we need for certain species. A lot of species have bumper years and bust years. So if we have a bumper year of a certain species, we'll try to collect a lot of it and hold it in storage. We've got a climate controlled sort of storage space, keeps humidity down, keeps temperature down, and keeps it so the seeds are viable for several years in the future when we might not have much of that species. So yes, we do have surpluses sometimes.
Susan asking the opposite question. Do you accept seeds from home prairie gardens, or is this a very selective process?
We will from volunteers. We do want to be a little careful that we're not introducing maybe a cultivated variety of a certain species. So I always have to ask some questions of the homeowner. You know, is it an ornamental variety of this native plant? We want to try to keep the genetics somewhat pure to the upper Midwest and not have altered varieties of genetics kind of coming into the gene pool here.
And we'll finish off with Dan Nickmeyer, really giving props for the presentation, how critical it is to the waters as well. Just pointing that out. His final question is, do you germinate any of the seeds into plants before planting? Maybe that would be a more successful process. And then we do actually have one quick extra question, and then we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, we really don't do much germination of our seed, other than we do have a grower program through a local prison system here and Fish and Wildlife partner, that they grow some limited number of seeds into plants that we put into rain gardens in the county park system. However, we go the vast majority simply with broadcasting seed. It's just so much more efficient on a large scale. Nature takes care of them. We don't have to transplant them, water them, maintain them.
And speaking of maintenance, that's the last question. What is the ideal humidity for seeds?
Okay, for seed storage,
Yes,
you probably, it's probably what you're talking about. You want your temperature plus your humidity numbers to be below 100. If you add temperature and humidity together, you want that to be below 100, and that's the optimal climate for storing seeds long term.
Excellent. Well, that'll have to do it for our questions. A lot were coming in right at the end, so if we didn't get to you, feel free to email info@cleanlakesalliance.org. They'll pass the question along to our presenter, and they'll get answers back too. I want to thank Lars Higdon for today's exciting talk. Programming note, Clean Lakes 101 Science Cafe talks will be off next month. So we're done for the rest of the year, and we'll be picking things back up as we get towards the Frozen Assets Festival in February. So that'll be very exciting. And there will be an additional email or on the Clean Lakes website for the details and the next date for the upcoming talks coming up back in person at the Edgewater. Again, if you'd like to help out our 27 Storm Track team here, we're growing out our facial hair, just a quick plug for that. in the chat section. So if you look at the bottom of the screen, it says share screen in green. Just to the right of that, there's a chat button. If you'd like to donate, we are raising money for the LGBT Cancer Center for research and advocacy as well for No Shave November month. Again, I'm meteorologist Max Saparis with 27 News. Very excited to be here, albeit virtually this month. We'll see you back in person next year, and we're very excited to see you at the Clean Lakes Alliance Frozen Assets Festival at the Edgewater as well. Talk to you next year.